Alright folks, and welcome back. Pre-patch is days away now. By the time this goes up, which should be Monday, assuming I haven't completely screwed my scheduling or been distracted by some faraway shiny object, like a sort of demented magpie, that'll be a grand total of 1 day for those of you in the US and 2 for us in Europe. So I've tried to leave this as close as I can before passing judgment, as it were. But I do want to talk about this. I've done my fair share of poking the beta with a stick and have come out with a list of concerns, and unless things change in the next 24 to 48 hours, some of those concerns are going to carry over into the live version of the game, which is really not great. Now, as a disclaimer, everything I'm about to go over and more could not be the case come the actual launch, and the pre-patch could grace the live game with all the shine, spit and polish it deserves. But with how things have been handled thus far, it could quite easily launch on life support, and we could spend the next 3 weeks till launch scratching our asses waiting for Blizzard to fix stuff they should have addressed months prior in the beta, or worse, we might even go into full launch with some of these issues still persisting, because instead of dedicating adequate time and resources to developing the game and ironing out the kinks, they opted to rush it out for reasons known only to them at this stage. I may also touch on things in the beta as well, but a lot of the issues in beta have carried over to the PTR, where the pre-patch is currently being tested. Not everything, but a fair, concerning amount, and given this content is due to go live very, very soon, and it's very unlikely we're going to see another update between now and then, we can only assume that what they're showing us is what they intend to go live to some degree. Now, I may miss some things. At the end of the day, I don't know every bug or broken thing. I just haven't come across them all. So if I haven't touched on something you think is worth mentioning, do feel free to let me know down below. First off, and arguably the biggest issue, is classes. A fair number of classes and specs are still suffering from issues that have been on about since the early days of the beta, and being so close to pre-patch, wherein we will actually get the Cata versions of classes, you'd expect them to be mostly, if not entirely, ready to rock. But that just really isn't the case. Now, I'm not saying nothing has been fixed in this department. That would be disingenuous and unfair. I know something that I've mentioned in previous videos is Blood of the North, a Frost Decay passive that affects their runes. That is now operating as intended, which is great, so don't get me wrong there. But the other two DK specs are still suffering from rune conversion issues, and as such, those specs are choked and play nothing like they should, because their resources just don't work. You've also got the current issue with Hunter Stables that I mentioned in my last video. It's just not been updated to the Cata version yet, and it's still as it was in Wrath. This is also affecting the Hunter's Call Pet ability, which should allow hunters in Cata to have 5 pets on them at any one time, so they can change up depending on the situation or if a certain buff is required. And it also gives them a hell of a lot more storage space for their animal compadres. In Wrath, there was the ability Call Stable to Pet, which allowed hunters to swap out their pets on the move, but this ability has been outright removed in Cata, so it's hard to argue that this lack of change, as it were, is intentional, as this makes managing pets a hell of a lot worse and just awkward. Again, it could be, come pre-patch day, it's all there, but it would have been nice to test the updated Call Pet feature so we can check that it, actually works before that point, but oh well. You've then got a whole host of other things of varying sizes that you might not look at twice in isolation. I mean, you might, I know I'd do at some of them, but when looked at as a whole, it's evident that Blizzard isn't so much developing Cata as they are looking for quick shortcuts. So let's take a look at guilds, for example. The guild system has been gutted within an inch of its life, which is really quite tragic. It's an iconic part of Cataclysm. Now, I understand there were some concerns, especially given Cata's accelerated content cadence, that smaller guilds would struggle to get to level 25 in a reasonable time frame, and as such would be at a severe disadvantage until they did. And I appreciate that. It's a fair concern, and that is certainly something that we expected would get a look in. Maybe, they'd increase XP rates or remove the cap on XP that was there originally, meaning a dedicated 10-man guild with maybe 15, 20 members max who are doing dungeons, PvP, leveling alts non-stop, that sort of thing. They'd be able to get to guild level 25, no issue. Instead, what has happened is that the guild levels have been outright removed. Fair enough, that in and of itself is not necessarily a negative, but what is downright baffling is that the perks associated with those levels have been, for the most part, thrown in the bin. Interesting things like Guild Mass Res, which I and others have mentioned before now, has just been handed out to classes with a healing spec instead. So your pure DPSers can't make use of it anymore. And even the legendary Have group Will Travel is no more, which is just lazy. It wasn't that game-breaking by the end of Cata anyway, because they put restrictions on it, so you couldn't use it in instances, for example. So, it couldn't be used to do silly things in raids. Them removing it is, again, lazy. And actually, in some past videos of mine, I did speculate that I reckoned some of the perks from guilds might be looked into, maybe tweaked, but that's all, tweaked. This isn't a tweak or a gentle prune, it's taking a razor to the entire bloody eyebrow. But what's even weirder where all of this is concerned at the minute on both the beta and the PTR is that the perks that do remain are available to the ungilded, and they are working. Now, the XP one was kinda hard for me to gauge, and I didn't really fancy leveling anymore, as this entire testing period has been 95% leveling, and I'm a little bit bored of that now. But the Justice Point one, for example, is 10% extra justice, and I can tell you, that is working. The bartering one, which is 10% off of vendor items, that works as well, and I went to check items I know the price of. Mounts mainly, those things are burned into my memory. When I am old and frail, I will be able to tell you the prices of mounts in this game. That I promise you. And they were all discounted. I did also check other things as well, and it was the same thing. It doesn't make any sense to me. Features that should be tested as part of a guild shouldn't be available to the ungilded, even for testing purposes, because it discourages actually testing the bloody guilds. If this makes it into the live game, it will completely defeat the purpose of them being guild perks, because they are now just the default. That 10% increase to justice points is actually no longer a 10% increase to justice points, that's just the baseline number. Same with the honor gains, rep gains, XP gains, etc, etc. It's not a perk or a boon or a buff if everyone has it all of the time. It is the status quo. 310 flying is another thing that I've gone over, and it's been a bit of a divisive subject in some circles, weirdly enough. Some like myself are a bit peeved that Blizzard haven't actually addressed this, and others are just shrugging, saying it doesn't matter, and they get over it. Which, as a quick aside, by the way, that's the attitude Blizzard hope you will have, because it lets them get away with delivering piss-poor, undercooked products. But a lot of the discussions I actually have with people on this topic, they usually boil down to, oh, it was only a thing they did back in the day as a gesture, and there's nothing actually in-game that says you should have this or it should happen, which is actually wrong. In fact, it is very wrong, because the achievement, what a long, strange trip it's been, exists. This is the meta achievement of all meta achievements. It requires you to have completed all of the big world events in the game, and in Wrath, the only reward for doing so is the Violet Proto-Drake, a 310% speed mount. In Cata, this is updated to reward the mount and Master Riding, so there is actually basis for at least people with this achievement to receive the upgrade for free. Now, on the beta, this achievement is classified as an account-wide achievement, but to be doubly sure, I checked it on my DK, the character I originally completed this feat on, and nothing. What this means is, again, at the very least, people with this achievement, if they were to log into the game on pre-patch launch day and they don't have 10% flying on at least that character, That's a bug. An actual recordable bug as it currently is on the beta and PTR. With that in mind, one of three things will happen. The achievement will be left as it is and our mount speed unchanged. The achievement will be left as is and our mount speed updated to reflect our accomplishment, or the achievement will get the second of its rewards nixed and swept under the rug, and we'll have to fork out the extra gold. So why am I bringing up something so piddly in the grand scheme, and something that a lot of people really won't notice or give a monkey's about? Because it's indicative of a larger issue with Cata and its development. We know how this topic was handled in original Cata. We have actual in-game verifiable proof of how it should work in Classic as well. But from day one of the beta and into PTR, it hasn't worked that way at all. And despite people reporting it over and over to Blizzard, asking for an answer as to why X thing isn't working, or if they're actively working on it, we've just gotten silence, even though the pre-patch, in the case of the US, is mere hours away from this video going live. But on the topic of flying, something to note. In pre-patch, we won't be able to fly, which in original Cata sort of made sense. We had a two-stage pre-patch event, with the first part taking place in the world before it got exploded. And, you know, it just was common sense to stick to the ground. But whatever their reason is for grounding us this time, I simply cannot fathom, because we're not even getting a bloody pre-patch event. But there is a tiny bit of an issue here. And that is Druids. Druids can actually use flight form on the PTR in the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor. And if that were to go live, that's an entire class who can fly around whilst everyone else is relegated to the ground. You may not think that's the biggest deal, but it will give them an edge in things like old world material farming, archaeology, and, you know, it's flying. People are quite attached to that concept. This is something I saw in the beta a few weeks ago, but didn't think too much of, because, well, everyone can fly there, and, you know, I kind of hoped by the time it hit PTR, this sort of thing would be ironed out, and it's not just broken, it's obscene, it's lazy, and the thing is, as I said, the PTR was updated less than a week before the bloody launch, and when something is on the PTR, generally it is mostly finished, it just needs those last few kinks ironed out. But this really isn't looking close to finished at all. The thing is, I would argue Blizzard do not want Cata and progression servers to succeed and operate as they have up to now. It's pretty evident, at least in my eyes, that the Classic development team do not want to be making Cataclysm. They would much rather be working on Season of Discovery and similar projects. Cataclysm is kind of the red-headed stepchild they have to acknowledge in passing from time to time. Why do I believe this to be the case? Well, leaving the beta and PTR and all those bugs aside for a moment, because I've covered that plenty in this video and others, my biggest giveaway is actually the communication. If we take a look at the Blue Post tracker between the launch dates being announced on the 9th of April and the date of recording, there have been exactly 4 posts pertaining to Cataclysm. If you look at that site, it might appear to be more, but that is just duplicate posts for each region. But Season of Discovery, there have been 9. In fact, it seems every time a feature in SOD stubs its toe, Blizzard are at the ready to issue a post or a hotfix or whatever, and that's great. Please don't think I'm crapping on SOD for having an active development team, but I do have to ask, where the hell is that for Cataclysm? Because only one of those 4 posts I mentioned for Cata actually has any information in it that we, the player base, need to know. You know, actual useful info that we've been speculating about since the beta went live, and that is the currency conversion metrics. Everything else is just surface level waffle that every YouTuber has covered already. updated leveling, Worgen and Goblins, that sort of thing. And you know what, speaking of the Worgen and Goblins post, it's hideously bad. Not because it's a nothing burger of a post, but because the info in it is actually wildly incorrect. I'll leave it linked below for you to laugh at, but in the racial traits for the Worgen, firstly it lists the ability to switch between human and Worgen forms twice, and the skinning passive flare is actually copied from retail and is not at all what is present in Cataclysm. It even lists an increase to deafness by 25%. Now, what is deafness, you may ask? Well, I had to Google that because I had no bloody clue. It's a profession stat introduced in Dragonflight. So, not in Cata and not relevant to this expansion whatsoever. And actually, the most egregious thing in this particular post is with the Goblins, where they list Gazlo as the trade prince and leader of the Bilgewater Goblins, i.e. the playable faction. It even mentions the ousting of Gallywix at the end of the Fourth War, and even the Horde Council. All of those things happened in Battle for Azeroth. And this is the point I'm getting at. The information and communication they do put out is not even half-assed. Half-assed is too generous. It's as if they had the intern hiding away in his Harry Potter broom cupboard ask a brain-dead AI to put out that post. This is basic stuff that they haven't even bothered to fact-check. So what does that say about the quality of the rest of their work on this expansion? We've not even had a dev notes or a known issues list since the 8th of April, and I promise you, there has been stuff that's needed to be addressed, be that changes they've made or haven't, bugs or perceived bugs, things they've kept out of this version, and just all manner of other things. And that's, again, the point I'm trying to get at. They don't give enough of a toss to communicate with their player base the same way they do with Season of Discovery, because as I said, I think it's obvious they don't care about Cata and its players, and if they could, they'd shuffle us all over to their seasonal servers and experiment on us like deranged mad scientists. And look, if they did just put out a simple post saying, we are aware of XYZ issues and we're working on them, and it was just more than surface level waffle, even if it didn't make it to the PTR or the beta and only existed on this fabled internal build where everyone gets their own personal blackjack table with complimentary lady friends, fine, but they haven't, and it kinda makes me think of that drowning kid meme. So, back to my titular question. Is the pre-patch ready? As it is available to us on the public test trail, God no, not by a long shot, and I would seriously be arguing for a delay if this were a brand new expansion. The thing is, too much is broken, and I've said it before. I know people like to argue, oh, they have their own internal build and it's probably all fixed, But that really isn't an argument Blizzard should be allowed to hide behind for shoddy workmanship. And credit where it's due, but Scotty J recently said something in one of his streams or podcasts or whatnot, which was, what are we actually supposed to be testing? Some guidance would be nice, or, something to that effect, and I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment, because we were released into the wilds of the Cata beta, and players have tested to the best of their ability, and nothing has publicly come of it on either beta or the PTR, and we've had next to no genuine communication from Blizz on this expansion, just surface level post fodder. If the only excuse available to them is they have their own internal build where, if not everything, mostly everything is fixed, why come pre-patch did we get a version that was only very slightly less buggy and broken than the beta? After all, the pre-patch PTR update went live less than a week before pre-patch launch, and it should be a fairly good indicator of the state of the game, and it's worse than most Cata private servers you can play on for free, and when a free server is put together better than something we're paying for each and every month, that's not a great endorsement for Blizzard. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here before I go further down rant lane, and just so folk know, I will be checking the PTR just before this video goes live to make sure that everything in it is still accurate. It's why I've left it so close to do this video. If something gets updated or fixed, it won't be in here, so for all you know, I've cut 90% of this video's subject matter by the time you see it. If it's still in, then it means it hasn't been sorted literally hours before it's due to go live, so do with that what you will. Hopefully though, yes, they do have their super secret internal build where all of this crap is fixed and you and they can turn around, flip me the bird and say, suck on that, vegetable boy, which, yeah, I'd be down for that because I want this to launch in a functional state. But anyway, so guys, like, sub, share your pals and so on, that'd be grand. Have a good one, folks. Bye for now!